Hi everyone, my name is Tanner Hugaboom, and today I am going to be presenting my influential communicator presentation on Vince Lombardi. So to start here, as many of you may know, Vince Lombardi was a coach of the Packers, but did you know that he was also a player and an NFL executive during his career? So who is Vince Lombardi? Vince Lombardi was born in Brooklyn, New York. He was raised by his mother and father, who immigrated from Italy. He began playing and coaching football at a young age. Unfortunately, he had passed away on September 3rd, 1970, from colon cancer. And lastly, here he was inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame in 1971. So, for my essential components of communication, I've decided to pick a speech which has now actually been turned into a book called What It Takes to Be Number One. So, as you can see here, the source is Vince Lombardi, as he is the one that is being quoted during this speech. Again, the message is the book or speech itself, which is called What It Takes to Be Number One. The channel of communication here would be through book, as most people are finding, this speech nowadays being sold in various books, actually by his son, who assisted with publishing it. In addition to that channel, obviously that speech was given by Vince Lombardi. That was actually given during halftime during the Ice Bowl while he was coaching the Green Bay Packers. The receivers of this speech would be the Packers or the players on the Green Bay Packers, and in addition to that, any coaching staff that would have been in the locker room as well. As far as the feedback to this speech is concerned, he did receive a standing ovation from the Packers players, basically giving them that additional inspiration to go out and play that second half of football. The environment in which this speech was taken or given was inside of a football locker room. And the context of this speech was supposed to be inspirational. Basically, he was giving this speech to Packers, as I had previously said, during the halftime of the Ice Bowl. As most of you may know, the Ice Bowl gets its name because of the cold weather that it was taking place in. It was a very rough game for every player and coach that was partaking in it. Basically, Vince Lombardi was giving this speech to get his players ready to go out and prepare for the next half and ultimately win the game. As far as interference is concerned with this speech, the only thing that I could really think of would be the noise coming from the stadium itself. It was a very rowdy football game. I would imagine most of you know about the Ice Bowl, but for those of you who do not, it was a very important game within NFL history. Again, it was the coldest game that was ever played to this date. But again, going back to the interference, the stadium noise would be about the only thing that I could think of that would interfere with Vince giving this speech to his players. So what makes Vince Lombardi a good communicator? Lombardi was very direct with his messages. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He basically laid it out how it was, and you were expected to either take it or leave it. That's just how he was, growing up as a football player, going through high school, as well as into college, and eventually becoming an NFL player, an NFL coach. Every message or every speech that he had given was direct. There was very inspirational meaning behind it, trying to get everyone situated or started up for either the second half or the first quarter, whatever the case is. Again, he was very direct with his messages, and within those messages, he was trying to be very inspirational. In addition to that, he did use a lot of analogies. For example, most of his speeches he would tie back to his personal life or the players' personal lives, how they could be a better man, a better woman, things along those lines. So he did tie everything that, even though he revolved most of his speeches around football, he was able to tie that information back into one's personal life and how they should think about what he said as they retire from football and go about their daily lives in the future. He did also prepare for a lot of his speeches as well. This one was a little bit different because he didn't really prepare the speeches as far as writing them down and giving them. A lot of what he said was just off the cuff and what he was thinking at that moment. But going through his experience, being a coach, in high school, a player, a coach, whatever the case is, he did experience a lot of situations where the quotes that he was giving would fit. So he used a lot of his past experience to prepare for his future speeches, being a coach in the NFL. So as far as the key takeaways with Vince Lombardi, Vince was more than a leader. He was a very good communicator. He was very inspirational with the way that he talked to everyone. My second point here, his communication skills, as mentioned, were very direct and inspirational. And he used a lot of previous examples for his communication, which ultimately made that very effective. He did reflect upon his life as a football player, brought that into his coaching style, and ultimately allowed his players and himself and his team to be successful in winning NFL championships, Super Bowls, things along those lines. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to answer them. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks.